Hello there. Okay, saying I'm live. I went out live a little early before Dr. Mann can come on. Thought I'd say hi to everyone. It's been a while. Hope you guys are okay. We'll wait and see. Hopefully people will start showing up. Um, got a great presentation today. So hoping we'll get some attendance and some people here signing up. Let's see. I am a little early. Oh, somebody signed on. See, there we go. We're going to get some viewers tonight. Yes, I know. I'm early, but I'm so excited. And I'm dying of heat because it's so hot here. Um, oh, there we go. Someone's there. Hi. Okay, so tonight we have Dr. Angela Mann, who is an associate professor at the University of North Florida. She's also a behavior analyst. More importantly, she's a great friend of JASA, the Jamaica Autism Support Association. She's gone to Jamaica a couple of times to help hold trainings for parents and teachers and assist where she can. So she is a very good friend of JASA, so we have to treat her nice. And hopefully she'll become a great friend of ours too. See how that goes, right? And tonight she's going to be talking to us about tips for building an independent play schedule. Independent's the word that gets me, right? I want to see how that possibly could be done, because for me sometimes it seems like it could be absolutely impossible. But I'm looking forward to hearing what advice she has for us as parents, some suggestions and some help. And as with all our guest speakers, please feel free to ask questions. Just post them in the comments. She'll get to see them. She'll try and answer them, whether it's during or after. She'll try and get to the questions. So please feel free to do that. In the meantime, while we wait for Angela to come, because she's, like I said, I'm early, want to remind everybody to please go to autismbelize.org. That's https://autismbelize.org. I say it like that because I don't want you to type in www. There is no www. It's autismbelize.org. On there, you're going to find our resources page, which are listing doctors, possible schools. I have a couple more to actually update that, but you can keep checking there, because as soon as I learn more things, I'm going to be putting it there. We have our A Parent's Perspective blog, and so far it's basically been my story, my thoughts and stuff with living with autism. But I am desperately hoping that some of you all will be willing to share. You can do so anonymously, or you can send me pictures with your story and your name, and we'll put it out there. If you want to do it anonymous, that's fine. You can there's a button on the web page. You can hit submit your story, or you can just email it directly to me. Contact me if you have any questions. And you can write on what you want, right? As long as it's somehow related to autism. Your life, your struggles, your challenges, your happy, awesome moments and success stories, which are great as well. Anything motivational, anything that can help and educate other parents and the general public. So if you are thinking about it, you have questions, concerns, message me. We can talk, because I'd love to get some stories in for a parent's perspective. Also on the webpage are little buttons that say Join Team Autism Belize. I would really love it if you guys can click it and just enter information. I promise not to spam anyone. But what I'm hoping to build is sort of an email database, so that when we do have big events like a webinar or parent support meeting or an event that we had to postpone that we planned for April, that hopefully we'll be able to do, is restrictions get looser and looser, and we can start doing things again, so that I can tell you about what's going on. So it's just an email for that. I will not be emailing you every week. I wouldn't be emailing you every day. I will try for once a month. Remember, I'm doing a lot of stuff, so don't worry about getting spammed. You won't do that. So please go join Team Belize and keep liking us on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter and on Instagram, because we post everything there too. On Instagram, you're going to start seeing a lot of our Autism Belize Real Truth things that I've been doing. And so far, it's been sort of my real truth, little quirks about Mateo and our lives or whatever. I'm sure you guys have quirks that are different than mine. And if you'd like, if you have an idea of, say, something that you do or your son or daughter does, oh, there we go. We have Angela signing in now too. So if you guys have any of those things and you want to share the story with me, and I'll create a quote for Instagram and everything to follow as well. So I'm going to welcome Angela. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for doing this for us.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really excited to be with you.
I am. I'm so excited. You know, I thought Kathy was going to like give me a harder time because I've been like, Kathy, can I use English? Like, I don't know. She's very, very busy. So I promised her we would treat you well and I won't abuse you or anything. Don't worry. I'm excited. Thank you so much for taking your time because I know this is a really crazy time for everybody.
No, thanks for inviting me. I'm excited to be here, and I have been kind of following what's happening in Belize for a little bit, so it's exciting to like be with you all.
Did you even know about Belize before all of this?
Not much, really. Actually, I think a while back when I met Kathy in Jamaica, I had actually reached out to someone in Belize, but it's been a long time. So, yeah, I'm really, your website's amazing. It's been amazing to see all the speakers you've had. So
I'll take that because I had to teach myself how the hell to make a website.
Really, really impressive. I used to run a support group here, and I'm kind of like, it inspired me. Like, I should get back into it. It looks great.
Great. Well, we have our first support group meeting at the end of the month. The YWCA was really grateful to let us use it. So it's going to be on Saturday, June 27th at 10 a.m. So I'm really excited. I'm hoping parents will come out and we get to meet because I've been talking to a lot of people via WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, over the phone. I've met a couple, but I'm really hoping that we can kind of come together as a big group and talk and everything. So I'm really excited for our first support group meeting.
That's awesome.
Oh, yes. Well, I'm going to let it go over to you. I sort of introduced you already. Told them you were coming, you're a friend of Jassa, so we have to treat you nice. And that you're going to be talking about tips for building an independent play schedule.
Okay, awesome.
I have no idea what to expect with this because I just hear independent and I think, my kid, I don't know. Independently, he can get into quite a lot of trouble. Other than that, I don't know. So I'm really looking forward. I've got my pen and my paper. I'm planning to take notes, and I am going to pass it all on to you.
Okay. Sounds good. And it looks like I can see live comments. So if anybody has questions or anything that they want to share, I'll try to kind of keep an eye on that as we go. I think, as Christy said, it's really a glamorous idea to think about your child engaging in an independent play for a while, right? And probably giving you a break, especially during these times when we've all been socially distancing, cooped up in the house together. And it can happen, right? It can happen even for kids who I think right now maybe have a short tolerance or short attention span. But it is going to take some work up front, right? So I think it still is important. I think this is worth putting some time and energy into, especially because at some point the kids will be going back to face-to-face schooling, and it'll be important that they kind of have some muscles built for being able to engage in learning and sitting at a desk and being engaged in instruction for a while. So independent play can help with that. The first thing that I think parents or caregivers will want to start with is setting up a really good play space where, this is kind of determined as the play area, right? It's really clear to your child that in this zone, this is where the toys are, this is where the activities are. we would prefer if this area didn't have any screens in it, right? So access to things like TV or iPad, unless you want that to be part of your independent play schedule. But typically that wouldn't necessarily be part of what we're after here. Maybe it would be the reward at the end for engaging in independent play. So really clearly defining that space for your child, that this is the play area. Sometimes it's really helpful to put different activities or sets of toys into clear bins. And it's helpful for a couple of reasons. One is it helps to organize the space a little bit. You can limit them. So if your child tends to take out everything, they're a tornado and kind of rip the room apart, then, having things in bins, you can set limits. You can say that we're going to take out 3 bins at a time, and then those bins have to be cleaned before they're put back. For some kids, that might even still be too much. You might do 1 bin at a time, right? So clear bins are helpful for that reason. Sometimes we'll put a little picture at the front of the bin to indicate what's in it so that your child can clearly maybe even match the picture to a schedule, which we'll talk about more in a second. So clearly defined space for play, having some clear bins with different activities or toy sets within them. And then I think the next part of this gets into teaching, right? And to some degree, with a lot of kids, we have to teach them how to play. So it's important for you to manage your expectations up front, because we'd all like a break right now, right? It'd be great if they could keep themselves busy for several hours at a time, but it might just not be practical right now, depending on where your child's attention level is, their tolerance is for being able to engage in activities independently for a while. So really thinking about where is my child at right now, and how do we build that muscle for them to be able to be independent for a certain period of time. So that might take some teaching, right? And oftentimes where we start is just having table time, right? So we invite, your child to the table. If just coming to the table is a challenge. I've worked with some kids where, they know that the table means work, or that the table means you're going to encourage them to eat food they don't like, right? So you might even just start by getting them to the table, praising them, giving them high fives, maybe even giving them like a tiny little piece of a treat, like a goldfish cracker, right, for sitting at the table, and then letting them go. And then slowly building that muscle up. How long can you kind of sit at the table, preferably with maybe one activity, like a book or something like that. So this is going to build up your child's muscle, their tolerance for being able to just kind of sit and be engaged for a while. And that alone can be its own task for teaching, right? That could take a little bit this summer. Again, especially if your kids are really busy and they're good at getting into lots of independent trouble, like Christy mentioned with her son. So sometimes what we'll do, and I'll see if I can kind of draw one here because I forgot to make one before I came on with you, is we'll create a token system. And some of you guys might already be using these at home. Hopefully you are, because they're really, really handy. Sometimes with my kids, when I'm doing these virtual sessions, I'll just make one quickly. And honestly, these can be as simple as something like this, a grid. This might be too much for younger kids, right? You might actually just do like the 4. And then what I'll tell kids is, I'm going to be watching to see that you're sitting really nicely at the table and, let's say, coloring your paper or reading your book. So every time I see you sitting nicely, I'm going to give you a happy face or a check, right? And when you get all 4 checks, then you can leave the table or have a treat or have iPad time or TV time, whatever it is, right? And so here you're just kind of periodically checking in with the child. And again, it depends on where their muscles are right now, right? Where their tolerance is right now. Some kids might need, like, every minute you're giving them that, check in the box, like you're doing it, good job, way to sit at the table. Some kids might need, might be able to go longer for several minutes at a time. And then you're checking in and praising them. Keep going, you're doing great. I love how you're sitting and keeping yourself busy right now. So those are kind of some basic tips for getting started. And honestly, that alone could take you a little bit this summer, right? Depending on where your child's skill level is right now. The next thing that I would say in terms of kind of tips for getting started with independent play is to consider developing something like a menu. So I've developed a menu that might be for a parent, right? So, you know, cooking dinner, right? Maybe I need to do some painting in the house. And then over here, we've got doing a dance party, right? Or listening to a book on tape. So these were things that I actually, my visual supports are actually in my office that I can't access right now. So I found these things in a magazine. I actually had my husband glue these to poster board and then just put some tape on them. So this can be really simple. You don't have to have like fancy supplies, but creating a menu of different activities that your child might want to engage in, because a lot of this is going to be around motivation. So it's supposed to be play. It's supposed to be fun. And you know, we want to kind of have as many options available that are going to catch their attention and keep them engaged. So you might start with the menu like this. Sorry, it's backwards. I'm having to adjust here. The next tip would be to, and again, hopefully you guys are using these at home. If you're not, this is, you could do this as almost like a play schedule. I've kind of structured it like a first then board. So first, you know, mom has to or dad has to cook dinner, right? Next, I have to paint the house. So I take these things off my menu and put them on. When I am done with all of that, then I'm going to get to play on my phone, eat some ice cream, and take a nap, right? So it helps to kind of structure your child's play. First, I'm going to do these activities. If I get through my play schedule, then I'm going to get some really fun downtime. The play should be fun in and of itself, right? But because, again, we know this could take some work for our kids who are more active and busy, it's sometimes helpful to offer some rewards at the end. And again, hopefully you're doing stuff like this at home. If you're not, these are tips. You know, parents do this in different ways. So you could have them, as they complete an activity, right? They could move it over to the checkbox, the done mark, right? Column. Sometimes parents will just have kids take it off completely. Sometimes at the bottom, they might have like a little done envelope that the pictures go into. So, you know, as they complete each activity, they go back, they check in with their schedule, and they move the activity. I'm done cooking, good to go, right? Next, I have to do the painting. So this could also require some teaching, depending on how familiar your child is with this, right? If they're doing something like this at school, they might pick it up really quickly, even if they're not used to it at home. If they've never seen something like this, you might have to do some teaching around this too. But having a nice play schedule, kind of structured out, visual for them. For kids who are readers, you might not need the pictures, right? You could just kind of have different words for them. So yeah, so those are some really basic tips. And I'm not seeing any comments, but if you have questions about those tips now, feel free to enter them into the comments, and I'll make sure that I answer those now. We covered a lot of ground there. I mean, to be honest with you, these are things, the things that we're talking about now, these basics of getting set up with play and instruction. These are things that as behavior analysts, sometimes we'll spend, you know, weeks maybe even months, depending on your child's skill level, just establishing good student skills, essentially, right? So being able to sit for periods of time, getting used to sitting at the table, getting used to using something like a menu or a choice board, and then getting used to using one of these visual schedules. So have some patience as you're setting this up. Once you've got all of that down, then the next step is to begin to think about activities that have really clear beginnings and ends. So a puzzle is a really great example of this, right? Your child can dump out all of the pieces of the puzzle. I'm thinking of like those board puzzles now that maybe have like 10 pieces. So they dump out all the pieces of the puzzle, and then once all of the pieces are back in their place, the activity is complete. And so, things like that are going to be really great for these independent play activities because you want things with a clear beginning and a clear end. And again, you could have those set up in bins, or you could kind of have stations set up around that play area. And so again, just getting into the actual independent play once you've built those muscles, it will still require a few minutes of setup. But hopefully you're then going to have some good time bought, right? Once they get used to the schedule. So it looks like actually we have a question from maybe Joss. And so she's saying, my son tends to put all the materials and cards in his mouth. Any tips on how to handle that while keeping him engaged? And I'm guessing that Joss means maybe like these types of visual support cards. That's a tough one. It might be, Joss, if right now you're doing the check-ins with him as he completes each one, it might be that you kind of remove it out of his space and take the cards from him. It's a little tougher if this is independent play. And he is supposed to be doing the schedule on his own eventually, right? So you might even take some time to just teach, like, cards going back on the board, giving him lots of praise when they immediately go on the board, as opposed to in his mouth. You might block that. And even depending on kind of how old your child is, maybe how big your son is, sometimes we'll even do hand over hand where we help him take these pictures and put them back so that he's not able to put them in his mouth. And then we praise him just for using the cards appropriately, right? So I love that you got the card back right away. Good job. And even that might get some kind of special reward, right? Like his favorite toy or his favorite, little sensory activity like tickles, something like that. You did an awesome job of putting the card back on the schedule. That's a good question, right? We do have some kids that will sometimes stim on the cards or get kind of locked on the cards, as opposed to using those cards as a support for doing other things. So that's kind of almost its own teaching protocol there, right? Just how to use those cards appropriately. Blocking, putting in the mouth, and then redirecting to putting it back on the schedule. And then lots of praise, lots of tickles, lots of whatever his favorite things are for just using that schedule appropriately. Hopefully that helped. That's a tricky one, but great question. Keep the questions coming too. So we were talking about, organizing that space with those activities that have clear beginnings and ends. And I thought it might be helpful to actually share some of those. So I categorize those based on essentially attention span. Awesome. Josh says he loves feeling validated. Yeah. I mean, one other tip, anytime that we're doing these teaching protocols, right? Praise is so important. So even if we're doing something like this token economy, you want to be sure that you're giving lots and lots of praise, like laying it on thick, right? And more specifically, even we talk about using behavior-specific praise. So the idea behind that is saying, you did a great job of sitting so nicely. You did a great job of patiently waiting, right? Good waiting. Great waiting. And the idea behind that is instead of just saying something like good job, where your child might not totally understand what the good job is for, right? Saying something like good job waiting or good job sitting patiently is going to kind of continue to tell them in their head, right? Like, oh, I got to be waiting patiently. I'm doing a good job sitting, right? Sitting and waiting. So lots more good tips. Okay, so back to some of those activities. Again, we have some activities that I'll share with you first that are more for kids who have kind of shorter attention spans and will lose interest quickly in an activity. So we want activities with those clear beginnings and ends, but they're brief. So some ideas might be something like color sorting. So, it could be buttons. Whatever you have around the house, sometimes buttons maybe not safe if your kids now they're chew on things, right? They have those little colored like craft pom-poms. Those might be a good thing to sort. You could sort things like little bears or other little toys that have different colors. Sometimes people will use like an egg crate where they'll paint each cup a different color, and then the child sorts the buttons or the pom-poms into each of those cups. So once all of those items are sorted, the activity is done. Right? So that's kind of a short, brief activity with a clear beginning and end. I mentioned puzzles earlier. Puzzles are great for things like independent play. You could set up one station that has two puzzles at it that are, again, matched to your child's ability to get through with an activity like that. So thinking about maybe puzzles with just a few pieces if your child's, wanting to be on to the next activity. Things like practicing tying shoes. So this is where we can get into a lot of the more like occupational therapy type work as well. So it can be both fun and instructional. Depending on your child's frustration level with things like this, right? So having just a pair of shoes there that they can practice tying, and again, this depends on the skill level. Stringing pasta, like, big round noodles onto a shoelace. So once all the noodles are strung onto the shoelace, then they're done. Sometimes this depends on your tolerance for messiness, but kids tend to really love this one. So getting a bin and filling it with rice and putting things like plastic animals into the bin, right? So they've got to find all of the plastic animals. Once they've found them all, then that activity is done. Or those little maybe magnet letters, right? So once they've found all the letters or all the numbers, then that activity is done. And again, it just depends on your child's ability to kind of sit and attend if they're, recognizing letters yet. Some other activities that I've got on my list here. So sometimes what we'll do is we'll create like little pictures. So we might even create something like, the number 8. And we put some Play-Doh out and we teach your child that what we want them to do is match the Play-Doh to the picture. So can they make the figure 8 with the Play-Doh? You could do several of those, right? Several templates for them. Let's see. Potentially listening to an audiobook. So that could be distracting for some kids if they've got the technology, right? They might just, kind of latch on to that and want to be playing with the technology. But an audiobook could have a clear beginning and end. That could be one of their stations in the independent play routine. If that's too distracting, then considering some like board books, right? Small board books. Again, books have a nice clear beginning and end. It might require some teaching to show them to look at the picture, look at the words, then go to the next page. Some kids just flip right through it, right? Let's see, other ideas. If you have plastic eggs, those colorful plastic eggs at home, again, that could be a nice matching activity. It's also got some occupational therapy, some fine motor involved in that. So you take the tops and the bottoms, maybe 5 or 6 different colors, and you separate them. And then the child's got to match. So you might need to teach the skill first, but once they've got it down, then they can start doing that independently. Coloring a picture. So, you could give them maybe 3 different crayons. You could even put a little dot into each part of the picture to indicate that they need to match their crayon with whatever that dot color is, and have them complete the picture. So again, maybe some preparation involved with some of these activities. And then finally, one of the things I'll do is share a link with Christy. I have a visual supports library set up on my Google Drive. And one of the things I've got within that are filed folder activities. And you might even see these at your child's school, or if they're working with a therapist, therapists might be doing some of these activities with them. So often what file folder activities involve are things like matching, right? So it could be that there's a shape on one, column, and then your child has a little cutout of a shape, kind of like my pictures I was showing you earlier, right? And they've got to move the shape to match the template, right, or the picture within the folder. So they do that for 5 or 6 shapes, and then they're done with that folder, and they go on to the next one. So these are really, again, very clear beginning and end. Once you've taught your child once, they really can get the hang of it. They can also be educational. You could have them sort things by big and little into columns, right? You could have them sort fruits versus vegetables. So it can be both educational and kind of fun, and typically can keep their attention for at least a minute or 2, right? Once you taught them how to use the folder and sort the different activities. So those will require a little bit of work, some preparation. If you have older siblings, maybe you can bribe them to help you make some of those, right, to help out. But I think those can be really effective and helpful too here, right? And get in a little bit of education. So any other, feel free too to share other tips for things, independent activities with those clear beginnings and ends if you have those. I am monitoring the chat. Christy, do you have anything for me?
Question, and typing for me is hard.
Okay.
I always battle the activities you're listing are educational.
Yeah.
But I always battle with myself if I should be pushing more education or if that's more of a turnoff. In other words, if he's coloring, should I be there going, that's red? Or if he's sorting animals, should I be going, oh, that's pinky? And he goes, ooh, ooh. Or am I just bugging him and I should just let the activity be the education itself? I never know if I'm pushing hard or I'm not pushing hard enough with him.
That is such a great question. I'm glad that you asked that. I think that there's a time and a place for that, right? There's a time and a place to be asking questions and to be, trying to make the activity really instructional. I think for the purposes of play, some of these things can be instructional, but we really encourage parents, especially because the end goal is for them to be doing this independently. We really encourage parents to try to kind of just take a step back when they're engaging in activities. So initially, when you're teaching them how to do these activities, you might be doing some instruction, right? This is big, this is small. This one goes in this column, this one goes in that column. But once you're into the independent play routine, then we want to just kind of step back, right, and let them engage in the play. It doesn't mean, I think the two go hand in hand, because once they've got the independent play down, it's going to help build the muscle for sitting and doing that instruction with them. And then vice versa, right? Once they've got more of the instructional skills down, they're going to be a lot more likely to play independently too. But
one other thing too, you mentioned the book and looking at the pictures and looking at the words. So we can introduce the books to their independent play even if they're not quite reading yet.
yeah.
So just be able to turn the page. So we're not there trying to tell them to read this, this, and this.
Nope, exactly. That's a great question too. Yeah. I mean, sometimes even if kids aren't reading, we want to kind of orient them to how we use books, right? So they don't have to understand all of the words, but for them to kind of notice the front page, right? And you might point that out to them when you're first kind of going through like how to use the book, right? So notice the front page, the book turns to the left, right? First, we look at maybe the pictures, then we check out the words, then we do that on the next page before we move on. So even that has a lot of value, whether or not they're actually reading the words.
All right. Thank you. Now that's me, so I'm going to let you go back to.
Okay. Okay. Those are great questions, and definitely keep them coming. I often am like thinking of lots of stuff, but not anticipating things I'm leaving out. So feel free to jump in. And about the book, I think also, again, there could be an instructional time. So maybe after the independent play is over, then you guys sit down and you look through the book and you ask them, like, where's the bird, right? Point to the animal on the page or find a plant. So then it can become more engaging. But when they're in that independent playtime, it might just be about them being able to sit and flip the book appropriately, right? So some more maybe complex activities, if you're if some of those things maybe are more basic for your child. Other kind of things for kids who have longer attention spans, can do lots of other skills, right? I think, again, those folder games can be really helpful. We just make them a little more complex and more at their skill level. I think other things like matching Legos to a picture, right? So maybe you build a fort out of a Lego and have your child match that. And I'm going to pause for a second, actually, because we have this question from, it looks like Rosanna. And she's asking, can you share a few tips for the classroom setting, especially where time management is a factor? That's another great question. So some other things when you're doing, I think honestly setting up an independent play schedule or routine in the classroom is going to look really similar to some of the things we've talked about, but there is difference in that, often teachers in classrooms are on a schedule, like you mentioned. So in those cases, we might actually even have something like a visual timer, or even like those kitchen timers, if your kids are used to seeing those, where they can see how much time they have at that station or in that activity. You might have individual timers for each station so that each kid can see that. If you don't have that, I think having like a classroom timer, and maybe as the teacher, you're reminding them, like, check the timer, right? We have 1 minute left at this station, something along those lines, can be really helpful. And I'm not sure, Rosanna, if you're asking to, like, what if they're not getting through the activity all the way, or they're not managing their time at the station well. I think that is almost its own skill to teach, right? And some of our kids might not have a good sense of time necessarily. So the best we could maybe do in that moment is do lots of cueing, right? You have 1 minute left to finish the activity. And that's going to help them develop that sense of time. It doesn't mean that they'll always complete the activity. In reality, and I think even reflecting as an adult, I'm still working on time management. So sometimes even with my own cues, I don't get through an activity all the way. I don't necessarily think that that has to be the goal, right? I think giving them something that they can be working through on their own is almost maybe more of the priority, and then shaping those time management skills, being able to complete the activity in a certain amount of time might be kind of the next level skill. Hopefully that helps answer your question, but feel free to follow up if you need some more tips on that one. So some other more kind of complicated, or complicated is maybe not the word, more involved tasks for kids that are kind of past basic beginning to end types of tasks. I mentioned matching Legos to a pattern, and sometimes even this can be, and I see that Rosanna is asking another question. This could even be drawing, right? A Lego pattern. And, you could color this in, and then they have to match their blocks with these blocks on the picture, right? So that could be one activity. And I see the follow-up here. So Rosanna says, right, where teachers have to keep monitoring kids. Yeah, I mean, it does get tricky. I feel like just for parents to monitor one child doing an independent play activity, it's tricky, right? You have to be checking in with them. Some kids are going to need more frequent check-ins than others to make sure that they stay on task and are engaged, right? And not just like tearing up your room. But it certainly gets even trickier when you're a teacher and you're in a classroom and trying to make sure everybody's staying on task with what they're doing. I think if you can do those individual timers and teaching the kids to monitor and use those, we have sometimes the visual timers where you see like the, red kind of on the clocks, and then the red like starts ticking down so they can see that they're almost out of time. Those are really helpful. I don't know how many people have those, right? But even those little kitchen timers, if you can get them used to using that, and providing some cues, right? Like maybe a bell that goes off when, and that's the 1 minute warning, something along those lines, so that they have time to clean up. But it's going to take a lot of pre-teaching up front when you've got a big group like that. And I'm not sure how many kids are in your class. Hopefully you've got some help to, I feel like teachers are like octopus arms, right? You've got to have like 15 different arms to reach everybody. Okay, hopefully that was enough good tips to at least get you going. Some other things for maybe older kids, or for kids who are a little more used to these types of activities. This is kind of a creative one, and again, it depends on how drawn to the technology and how appropriate your kids can be with the technology. But a lot of my older kids like this a lot. So making like almost like a YouTube video, or recording themselves, either maybe teaching a skill. It could be reading a book, right? Maybe it's even reading a book to grandma, something like that. That could be something that keeps them engaged for a while. I think in the time of COVID, right? I've seen kids doing like video messaging kinds of activities to friends, right? So maybe they read a book, or they sing a song or something along those lines that they send to their friends. So that could be an independent play activity for older kids. Again, depending on how independent they can be with the technology, that might require some monitoring. it can be really fun things like building a pillow fort, right? That could be an independent play activity where you've got like, 5 or 6 cushions and pillows set up. That's one station. And they take some time to like build their own pillow fort. Maybe that's even the first activity, and the rest of the activities take place in the pillow fort. That could potentially keep them engaged for a bit. Sometimes older kids will give them like an empty comic strip. So, just several long boxes, and we'll ask them to create a story, right? Create a comic. And again, for some kids, they're really imaginative. They're going to take off. This will be really easy for them. For other kids, you might need to help get them going, right? And give them an idea of what that story might look like, and then let them have at it, right? Let them fill in that comic strip. They can draw. Even if they're not able to write the story, right, they can draw it out. So that could potentially keep them busy. And again, typically there's a clear beginning and end. You've got a starting block for them, and then there are several other blocks to fill in, and then they're done, right? A book challenge. So you could tell them, like, I want to see how many books you can get read in 30 minutes, or if they can make it an hour, right, of reading. That would be awesome too. You could potentially even quiz them afterwards, like not in a kind of harsh teachery way, but more just like a fun way, right? Like, let's see how many facts you remember from each book, something along those lines. So kind of making it a fun way to engage in reading if they're into that, right? Creating a race car track out of materials at home. So you could make kind of one of the stations be a bin full of just like toilet paper tubes, right? Paper towel tubes, paper, ribbons, whatever you've got. Maybe Tupperware, right? Containers. And they build a racetrack for their car, and they see if they can make it work. So that's something that could keep them engaged for a bit. Doing an alphabet scavenger hunt. So with that, if your child's fluent in the alphabet, right, you could ask them to find objects from around the house that start with each letter, right? So I found an apple for A. For B, I found a banana. For C, I've got the cat, maybe. That might be trickier. But you've got the idea, right? So they've got a bin where they put all of these items, and then they talk you through at the end all of the items they found for the alphabet. It might help to give them a chart of the alphabet, right? So that they can check off each one. That should keep them busy for a while. Giving them paper plane instructions. So you could even potentially draw out a template, and they've got to actually make the paper plane from the instructions that you gave them. So these are all a little bit more kind of complex, but it's things that could potentially keep some of our older kids, or kids that have a lot of the more basic skills under their belt, and they're feeling really bored and kind of cooped up at home, busy for a while. So those are a lot of the activities that I brainstormed. If you have more, I'm open to hearing them. I'm sure all of your friends and other family members would like to hear them as well. One tip I'm thinking of now that I didn't share earlier, and maybe I did, but it's really worth emphasizing, is that, initially kids are going to require more frequent check-ins. To get back to what Rosanna was saying, and it does make it really tricky if you're a teacher and you have multiple kids, but when you're first teaching these things, it will be helpful, if you've got 2 or 3 activities on their chart, right, or 2 or 3 play stations, you might need to check in at first, at least after every activity, right? or maybe even more frequently, just to come in, give lots of praise, again, lots of that validation, right? You're doing a good job. I love how you're putting that puzzle together. You're really focusing. And that's going to be kind of like filling their gas tank to keep them going, right? We know that lots of kids are very attention motivated. And so when we're asking them to do independent play, we're kind of often depriving them of attention. And so sometimes the fun activity isn't nearly as fun as coming in and bugging you, right? Because they want that attention, they crave it. So anticipating that and planning to give them some attention to keep them going, right? So that the activity is still really fun, but they're also still getting some of that attention need met too, right? And again, eventually you can start to even space that out as they get more engaged and more excited about the activities and the playstations that you've set up. But keep in mind that sometimes you are competing with that, right? Like, what's more fun than just hanging around with mom all day, or asking her 15 times for a sandwich or something like that? So, keeping in mind that that will still be a need even when your kids are playing independently. They're still probably going to want some attention from you. So doing some check-ins might really help just prevent some of that and keep them engaged in the play activity. So those are, I think, all the big tips and, setup and activities that I had brainstormed for you. I don't know if, Christy, you have any more questions, or I'm not seeing more questions in the chat.
I've got two things. I think that in the beginning, when you're talking about building the muscle, the table time, the things, a lot of us are really concerned. Yesterday, our Minister of Education talked about schools going back August 10th. And I think that hit us as parents, like, oh my gosh, are they going to be ready? What's it going to be like? What's going to happen? And regression is, it's on my mind. I'm sure it's on the others. So I love the idea of building the muscle, starting the table time, some of these things, these activities. I think us working as parents trying to set up something like this will help our kids sort of readjust, maybe even if it's just a little bit easier back into a classroom setting, considering they've been out for months. I think that was excellent. For your older activities, they're not going to work with my son, but the making the video and the scavenger hunt, like I immediately think of my godchildren who are so technology driven, and their mother who is in Canada going, oh my gosh, I'm going crazy because I've got, they're bored and they're driving me insane and we can't go anywhere or do anything. And I think, giving them a task and saying, try and do this sort of video or try and do that with things they like. I think that's going to be a great idea. Like the scavenger hunt thing might be cool. I don't like the bin with rice because I've tried that stuff at all.
Yeah, you have to have a certain tolerance level for that one.
For Mateo, I can easily take the same magnetic letters and hide it around my living room, considering he's always rolling around it anyway. And then saying, hey, do whatever. Or the pillow fort, because he loves the tent. Maybe he will work better or play longer if he's in his tent. Like, I should take that down there. So I love the ideas for the play, but I really think that, especially considering the press conference yesterday and August 10th, that was just glaring in our head, that building that muscle, getting the table time, whether it's, they're playing with their cars or doing a puzzle or whatever, at least we're getting them to sit and focus and at least, start getting engaged again. Trying to do that. I think those were excellent tips. They're not really questions, but I know as you were saying that, I kept thinking, I have no idea what August 10th will bring for us. So
we're in a similar boat here, and I really worry. A lot of my kids I feel like they're like in the hot tub. They're like on their electronics. I had a kid tell me the other day he's been chillaxing. So they've really been enjoying the break, I think, in some ways. And I worry about the same thing, that once they have to go back to school and it's like this routine hits them, and it's 8 hours of sitting. It's going to be like jumping into an igloo, like an ice cold pool. So I'm
telling people, my kid has become like a cross between like Tarzan and Mowgli. He's just like so wild child. Today, and today was really hot with humidity in the city. It went up to 109. Felt like that.
Oh my
In
gosh.
some districts, it went up to 119 with humidity. That's how it felt like. So at one point this afternoon, I'm like, wait, he's quiet. He's probably gone in the shower again. Let me check because my water bill's crazy. I walk into the room and he's laying there and the fan is on him and his legs start raving naked. And I was like, oh my God. And part of me wanted to say, boy, go put on your clothes. And the other part going, that's exactly what I wish I could do.
Yeah, I get it. I get it.
It's a wild child. So it's a challenge. And now that I've got like a date, now I got to highlight. I got to think, okay, now we got to get used to wearing shoes again. And, following instructions and waiting your turn because it's just been him. So I'm going to have to like highlight building your muscle for the next month. I'm going to be using that all the time. I got to build this muscle and make sure he's social again and doesn't go to school being half Mowgli, half Tarzan.
Well, for all of us, really, right? Like, I mean, I can relate to that as an adult. I'm not quite Mowgli, but I have my days, so.
We all have. But I want to tell you, thank you so much again. These are some great tips and some ideas. You're not going to understand my handwriting, but I did take a lot of notes.
Awesome.
I really appreciate you taking your time and helping us out. And I hope you're going to come back and help us out again sometime.
I would love to. I would love to. Hopefully after this virus is over, maybe I can come visit in person. That would be great.
Yes, we're having fun. So yes, we'll work on that. I will hold you to it. But thank you so very much. I really appreciate it. Please take care. Stay safe. Just so you know, we'll be saving this and posting it on the website and on YouTube and everything else so people can come back and listen again, or if they missed it, they can come and listen later on or whatever, but it'll be there for everyone. It's going to be a reference. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Chrissy. I'll try to send that link to you too with all the file folder activities and stuff like that. So
it's in Google Drive or whatever, then I can put in hours and share it on Facebook and everything. So thank you.
I'm going to do that. Yeah, thanks. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a good night.
You too. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. All right, guys, that's the end. It's been just about an hour. I really hope I will not forget to share the link. I'm going to highlight it. Thank you. Thank you guys so much for joining us at so late a time. I know you've had long days and you're probably tired and just want to kick back and relax, especially a hot day like this. So thanks for taking the time. As I said before, this video is going to remain on Facebook. I'll be posting it on YouTube by tomorrow or latest by Friday. Then it'll be on the website. So if you know of someone who can benefit from this, it's not obviously just not for children on the spectrum, but it could be for all children. So it could be beneficial to any parent or teacher that wants to listen. It'll be there. Please share and go to autismbelize.org and join Team Autism Belize so you can keep up to date with everything we've got planned. Thank you guys. Have a great night. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.